Atma Chaitanyamashritya Dehendriya Manodhiyaha Svakriyarteshu Vartante Surya Lokang Yata Janaha. Atma Chaitanyam, vitality of consciousness. Ashritya, depending upon. Dehendriya Manodhiyaha, body, senses, mind, and intellect. Svakriyarteshu, in their respective activities. Vartante, engage. Surya Lokang, light of the sun. Yata, just as. Jana, people. The body, senses, mind, and intellect engage in their respective activities depending on the Ātman's inherent consciousness, just as men work by the light inherent in the sun.
Namaste. So everyone is dependent on consciousness. Yet, nobody recognizes Brahman unless they hear about it from the scriptures. This is one of the weirdest, I mean, for someone who has any realization of Brahman, this is one of the most striking things that nobody has ever guessed that they are Brahman. You have to be told about it. And even though people in their ordinary state know that they exist and know that they're conscious, just try it. Go out on the street and ask anybody, do you exist? Nobody is going to say no. So they know that they exist, but where do they get the potency of existence from? And where do they get the consciousness? What does it say here? Atma Chaitanyamashritya, dependent on or taking shelter of the consciousness of the Ātman. All the beings are working. Janaha here is translated people or men, but it can be interpreted to mean all living creatures who are born, which is everything. So all the creatures, even plants, are dependent on the consciousness of the Ātman. Yet, even intelligent human beings, I mean, just look on Hacker News. Every week there's a new theory of consciousness, a new bogus, materialistic, godless, atheistic, reductionist theory of consciousness that is, of course, absolutely wrong. So they are making all of these guesses where the perfect, already existing theory of consciousness is right there in the Upanishads. See? But because of their atheistic bias, they can't accept. Just like they can't accept the evidence that I am conscious, therefore I am Brahman. How else are you going to be conscious? Where else is consciousness going to come from? Quantum activity of quarks in the brain? I mean, give me a break. The crazy stuff that they come up with. It just gets more outlandish all the time. And it's all wrong and cannot be proved. So there's no way to dissect a living brain without killing the subject. You can't prove it. And you can't prove it by measuring things from outside the brain, because the brain is too detailed, too complex. So yeah, maybe you can, by stimulating certain nerves or brain cells, produce some effects. But that's not consciousness. That's phenomena. See, the problem is basically in the theory or the philosophy of dualism, that consciousness has to be an effect. It has to be a phenomenon in the material world. All dualistic philosophies come to the same conclusion, or I should say, adhere to the same dogma, because there's really no evidence for it. They say, well, consciousness appears to come into being at the birth of a living entity, but that's not true. The consciousness is pre-existing, and it just becomes noticeable at the time of birth. And similarly, at the time of death, consciousness apparently disappears. But actually, we know that it doesn't, and the research into near-death experiences is more than enough proof of that. So, consciousness can only be a quality of the absolute, because consciousness itself is absolute. How are you going to say, well, they say that consciousness changes. Sometimes it gives pleasant perceptions, sometimes unpleasant, sometimes neutral, sometimes it's waking, sometimes it's dreaming, sometimes it's in deep sleep. But those aren't qualities of consciousness. Those are qualities of the mind and body, the senses. So the consciousness is always there as the neutral witness. And everyone, as is said in the verse, everyone is dependent on it. Without consciousness, nothing happens. Just like without the light of the sun, nothing could happen. Life could not exist. So in the same way, without consciousness, what is this body? It's just a dead body. Consciousness is the difference between a living body and a dead body. I mean, when a person leaves the body at death, in a minute before and a minute after, the same chemicals, the same organs, the same substances, the same design is still there. Only one thing is missing: consciousness. So I was present, I had the good fortune to be present at the passing away of my sannyas guru, Jnanananda Swami. And he was so, unaffected by the dissolution of the body. He just wasn't concerned about it. He said, I don't mind what happens to the body. That doesn't affect me. And I happened to come to his ashram just as he left his body, just as he took his last breath. And I immediately went into meditation and tried to locate him. One of the things that I can do is when I have a relationship, an energetic relationship with a person, I can follow them. I can locate them after death. But I couldn't find him. And after we took care of, the various duties on the leaving of the body of a saint, I had about 4 or 5 hours before the actual funeral, the cremation. And I just sat with him and I went deep, deep, and I tried to find him. Because every other time I've been present at a death, it was easy to find. I could follow them and see where they went. But not this time. Finally, after 4.5 hours or something like that, I got in touch with him. And he was just like an expanding sphere of light. And he was in total bliss. So consciousness, Brahman, is not only the source of everything, everything depends on it because it's the cause, the root cause, or the ultimate cause. So, what is consciousness that it is the cause of everything? Well, it's awareness of being, isn't it? If something exists, if something has being, we can be conscious of it, but not otherwise. And this is a deep, deep subject which is discussed in detail in Shankaracharya's commentary on the Vedanta Sutra, or Brahma Sutra, which we have gone over in a previous series. So I'm not going to get into it here. But basically, without consciousness, nothing can be shown to exist. Therefore, consciousness is the cause of everything.
Tat Sat Om Shakti Om